Hi, everybody. Thanks for logging in today and joining us for this session. My name is Graham Haas. I'm a lecturer at the College of Law in Queensland, and I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Desi Vlahos in Melbourne. How are you going, Desi?
Very well, Graham. Yourself?
I'm very well, thank you. Sending thoughts and support and all that sort of stuff to everybody in Melbourne who's doing it tough during COVID at the moment. Thanks for dialing in today. Our job is to give you some practical tips in relation to your time management and hopefully make your working days a whole lot more enjoyable by developing these skills to actually manage your time a little bit more effectively. So we can't see any of you today, unfortunately. We know that there are 44 of you out there. It's going to be pretty dry if it's just talking at you the entire time. So what I would really love to do with this session is get lots of questions from you all. I'd be more than happy to spend half the session just responding to your questions. So please, as we go through, don't hesitate to, I think there's a Q&A function down the bottom of your screen. You can use that, or you can use the chat box as well. And from time to time, we'll check those. Just be patient with us, but we would really love to hear from you. What I'd be interested to hear initially, if you can access your little chat box down the bottom, just send us a message. Where are you from? Which city are you logging in from? And what are you doing? Are you a student? Are you a graduate? Are you a young lawyer? Use that chat box because we'd love to know a little bit more about you all. So by way of overview, this is part of the Academy of Practice series, which is a series that the college is running. It's free webinars for law students and graduates that we will be hosting throughout the year. I'll give you a bit more information about our next session at the end of this one. Desi and I have done a number of presentations in relation to time management. We did our initial presentation at an international conference in Hong Kong, which sounds glamorous, but it was unfortunately legal academics. So lots of people sitting there in cardigans, knitting sweaters and scarves and that sort of thing. We also did a presentation at the Wellness for Law Forum last year and visited a number of universities and talked to their students about how they can manage their time better. So I think we'll give you some great tips today to take away with you and things that you can work on to improve your time management. Where does this all come from? It was really inspired by one of my students a number of years ago, sitting in a wellness workshop at the College of Law. And we were all talking about getting through workloads and that sort of thing. And he just chipped in and quietly said, well, this is what I do on a daily basis. Before I leave work, I tidy up my desk and I set a task list for the next day so I know what I need to come into. Then when I come into work the next morning, I open up my inbox, I clear out any emails or as many emails as I can. There's a lot of emails that come in that I don't need to deal with. And then the ones that I do need to deal with, I just swipe left, I think it is, and I make that a task in Outlook. So he clears his inbox on the way into work. Then he does 2 minutes or so of a breathing exercise on a breathing app, and then that gives him a bit of time to have a look through news stories and notifications and that sort of thing. But it means when he got to work, he already had his day sorted out. His inbox was clean. He knew what he had to do. And when he said this to us, our sort of jaws dropped and our eyes turned into saucers, and we looked at each other and thought, wow, this guy really knows what the hell he's doing. And that's really inspired me to think about how can we teach young lawyers and law students to manage their time a little bit better and hopefully enjoy their working day a little bit better. So I want to start this presentation by getting you to think about this scenario. Imagine your job was a chef. You worked in a kitchen and you trotted off to work one morning. You get into work at 10 o'clock and the kitchen's a mess. The cleaning needs to be done. The fridges are empty. The shopping hasn't been done. And you know you've got a work function coming in to eat at your cafe at about midday. So you've got 2 hours, the place is a mess, you need to do the shopping and you need to prepare all the food. What I'd like you to think about is just how you might respond to that scenario emotionally. What does it feel like inside for you? Do you think that's a positive thing and I'm going to relish this opportunity, or is there a certain element of dread along with that? In the chat box, write up. And some of you are starting to write in where you're from. That's awesome. In the chat box, tell us how you would react to that situation. Is it a positive reaction or a negative reaction? How do you feel about that? Because for many of us, that's what it sort of feels like when we go into work of a day. We've got this challenge ahead of us, and how we approach that challenge is really critical. But Traditionally, this is how a lot of us do it as lawyers. I spend most of my days just trying to hold it together, just trying to deal with one spot fire, move on to the next one. And maybe once or twice a year, I'll have a moment where I feel like I'm actually on top of my work and I feel like things are under control. But that's once or twice a year tops, I think. And even more rarely than that, I might look back and think, well, I actually did a good job with that. That's something I accomplished and feel good about it. But the rest of the time, there's a lot of anxiety and fear. I'm aware of the things I haven't done. I'm aware of the things I did, but I should have done better. Time management is emotion. It's all about emotion, and I want to talk about that today. For me and for a lot of us, time management is primarily motivated by fear. But this isn't just me. It's fairly common to us as high achievers and as perfectionists. So I'm sure that a lot of you can relate to that as well. What are those fears that motivate us to get through our workload each day? Well, there are a number of different things there. One might be the fear of not being good enough, not getting the work done and showing that I'm not actually capable of doing the job. One might be failure, fear of letting people down, fear of getting sued because I've done a poor job at something, fear that a complaint might be made to the regulators, fear that I might lose my job, fear that's very common with high achievers, and that's the imposter complex, that people are going to find out that really I don't know what I'm doing, that I'm just fooling everybody. And I don't want everybody to find out how little I actually know. So this imposter syndrome is common to all professionals. And you just wait for that one thing to happen where everybody finds out. So there's a lot of fear that motivates us with our time management. And there's insecurity can underlie all of that. So we tend to go the extra mile to somehow make up for those fears. We take on more work than we can handle. We set the bar unreasonably high for ourselves and we set unrealistic goals. We beat ourselves up when we don't meet those expectations. We beat ourselves up when we do meet the expectations, but because we could have aimed higher, we could have pushed ourselves a little bit further. And I'm generalizing here, but what we're talking about is character traits very common to the high achievers and to perfectionists. We don't pay any respect to our limits and what we need to do to function and operate well as human beings. We don't pay any respect to what we need to do to look after ourselves. It's gotten us this far, gotten us through uni. It makes us good at what we do, but only to a certain extent, because all of that comes at a significant price. It's at the cost is our own health and our well-being and our ability to get the job done in the long run. It affects our efficiency and our productivity at work if we're wasting time on things unnecessarily. And it also critically affects our relationships with the people in our lives that matter, because we may not be allocating time where we should. So where does this all lead us? If we're largely motivated by fear, but would rather enjoy our working days and enjoy your study and enjoy your days at work, what can we do about that? Imagine not having to carry around all of that anxiety and worry, and that being your prime motivation. So for lawyers, time famine is a practicing lawyer's number one complaint, not having enough time to get things done. And it's also one of the leading causes for lawyers leaving the profession. Half of the profession will say that their busy work schedules allow them too little time for their families or themselves. And as a result, many lawyers leave practice. Now, block your ears if you don't want to hear this, because it is startling. But 5 years post-admission, 5 years after getting admitted, about anywhere between 50% and 70% of lawyers will have left the profession altogether. And one of the leading causes for that is that time famine, not having enough time to do things. Desi, I think you've got some statistics there in relation to that.
I do, and I'll put them up just now, actually, just up so everyone can see them. Just bear with me one moment. All right. So you should all be able to see that now. So just really off the back of what Graham was just saying in terms of this this time famine that a lot of practicing lawyers report that they're experiencing, the Legal Firm of Choice survey that came out last year showed us that 53.2% of lawyers with 1 to 3 years of experience they intend to leave their current employers, compared to 38.9% of those with less than 1 year post-qualification experience. So We know that if you contrast this by age, we actually know that 44.6% of those that are aged 26 to 34, they're actually going to leave their firms, compared to 36.6% of those aged 18 to 25. So what we found from this study is that the percentage of lawyers reporting frequent fatigue of being worn out by the end of the day seems to be on the rise. Graham also talked about, it was an ABA study that was conducted in America that showed that 45% claimed work schedules were allowing them too little time for their families or for themselves as well. And what I actually, took from a lot of this research as well was the fact that time is the most cited justification for lawyers failing to take on board pro bono cases. And there was a study that was conducted, the University of Queensland study into pro bono values. It mentioned time constraints being the most discouraging factor for not engaging in pro bono assistance. And obviously this was followed by the very much the what most report on being the billable time pressures. So not only are lawyers assuming those personal effects of time famine, but these effects are actually translating to the community in need of their assistance. And this is particularly important and unfortunate, really, since there is a reciprocal nature of altruism which applies to pro bono in some sense, which suggests that helping others is actually beneficial for our mental health and improves our well-being. There was also one other study I wanted to make mention too that's been elevated to the forefront, and that was the NARS study, which stands for the National Attrition Re-Engagement Study, that was conducted in 2012, and that it investigated the drivers, particularly it compared the drivers of women from the profession as well, and it showed us that the most frequent reasons for choosing to leave their role as practicing lawyers included having a better work-life balance, reduced stress and pressure, and more flexibility to manage their work. So it's interesting. We're going to be seeing quite a few changes as a result of these work-from-home situations as a result of COVID, but and hopefully we'll start to see a little bit more flexibility across the board. So, Graham, I think I might actually touch on the mental health statistics in the legal profession too, because that very much follows on from this as well. And we're going to obviously show you over the course of this session as well the relationship between time management, well-being, and productivity as well. There are strong correlations between all three of them as well. Graham and I are mental health first aid instructors for the legal profession and for students as well. So this is a particular passion of ours, particularly when we're trying to change the culture and educate both law students and lawyers across the board about the mental health situation in the industry as well. So we know that lawyers suffer from mental health illnesses at far greater rates than the general population. I don't know if anybody knows what that statistic is, but it's very much covered off in that first dot point there of that slide there. We know that 33% of lawyers and 20% of barristers suffer disability and distress due to depression. They don't seek help and they self-medicate with alcohol. We know that alcohol use in the legal profession is extremely concerning. There's a high rate of suicide and suicidal ideation. But what's really important here, and as I've highlighted here, it's the law students and the young lawyers that are most vulnerable. So this is why it's really important to look at all the different areas that are going to be contributing to stress in your life, because ultimately what we're trying to do is encourage early lawyers as well to have fulfilling professions as well and careers, whilst at the same time making sure you don't burn out as well, and which could contribute to a mental health illness at some stage in your career as well. Another layer to that as well was the fact that 80% of disciplinary matters involving lawyers have an underlying mental health issue. And for anyone that's about to do their PLT or they've started doing PLT, you'll obviously see in terms of when we look at ethics and professional responsibility as well, this is really important to take into account as well when we're looking at the professional responsibility that we take with us, throughout our careers as well in practice. And we also found from that study as well that professionals had a higher than average depression score than the general population. So there's a few statistics for you to look at as well and to consider. And we're going to now, I'm going to obviously throw back to Graham, who's going to take you through a little bit about how time management really ties into all of this. So I'll just stop that, Graham.
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, completely bummed you all out now, but what we're trying to do is drive home the importance of actually taking control over your working lives and taking control over your workload. We don't want you to be a victim of the pressures that are put on you and the workloads that you have. So I'm really keen to get into some practical and concrete things you can do. Some further background. It's also poor time management can actually lead to malpractice claims if you're not getting your work done, obviously. But so how do we deal with this? As lawyers, we've got this strongly held belief that if we're getting behind, we can catch up. We just need to catch up. We need to work faster, do more things at once, work into the evening, skip the exercise, eat lunch at the desk, and miss dinner with the family. I've had grads tell me their friends don't call them anymore because they know they're never available. They're always working. It doesn't work very well for most lawyers, and it's caused a huge amount of burnout and dissatisfaction within the profession. We can catch up in the short term, but in the long run, we never get caught up. People are always throwing things at us. The pressures are always there. So more late nights and more frustration. So critically, we don't manage time, we manage ourselves. Taking control is so important. Time management is largely about emotion, and that emotion is primarily fear. So let's see if I can share a screen here. Get ambitious. Okay. So what would we do? Okay, if we wanted to enjoy our working lives more, if we wanted to be less stressed and feel more in control of what we're doing. Our humble aims today are this. We want to understand the emotion of time management. We've talked about that. We want to give you some simple strategies to manage your time more effectively. And I'm going to talk you through what I see to be the 3 steps of effective time management that we all need to work through. Desi, what do you say? What is time management and why is it so important?
Well, I suppose, it's really important to look firstly at, why do we time manage? So we know that the whole purpose behind time management, is to make sure we're setting the right goals for ourselves, make sure we're meeting those goals. It's also to track your tasks and your workload, whether that be in university, whether that be if you're in those early years of practice as well. It's also, and I saw in the chat room before when I was having a look, some people were referring to, the importance of delegation as well, but it encompasses that too. It's about, making sure you're delegating appropriately and effectively at the same time too. And Graham will talk about this when we give you a couple of steps, towards the end of this session as well, in doing so. But it's really about, being proactive as much as you can in order to make sure that you are, effectively delegating in those scenarios too. It's also about developing, systems for tracking, pending matters as well and deadlines, establishing procedures for communicating with your clients as well. It's also going to be as well relevant in university as well, particularly when you've got deadlines and competing deadlines. There's some universities now that are doing block study and things like that as well, where the workload is, does kind of, I was relating it to, the end of a Tetris game as well, when the blocks just keep very much just dropping quicker and quicker. So, how do you deal with that kind of scenario too? It's also about handling client matters diligently and competently, and as Graham was talking about as well, we're trying to minimise as much as possible and reduce the risk of misconduct through better organisation as well, because those, as I was saying, those professional obligations are very, very important, and you'll learn about them particularly when you start your PLT. So Graham was also talking about this session being about looking at a lot of the emotion that's behind time management. So what I wanted to show you here, and I'm going to share my screen now, was to show you just a couple of things as well. When we think about time management, it sometimes it can be, a little bit misleading. We know that time in itself can't actually be better. Is it's only the way a person deals with time can be influenced. So that's why it's so relevant when we talk about behaviour and emotion and the way we react in situations too. So we know it's a resource of interpreting the use of time and appraising those, the importance of activities through an expansion of prioritising and assessing our behaviours as well, which is going to improve our productivity and it's going to bring down our stress levels as well. Okay, so when we're looking at this slide here, we can see it comprises very much of, firstly, the time assessment behaviours, so the awareness of the here, the now, the past, present and future, and a self-awareness of one's time use. And I'm going to go into a little bit of further detail on that a little bit later. Secondly, it's about those planning behaviours as well. So those instructions or tools aimed at preparing to use your time more effectively as well. So looking at some of the things such as, the setting goals and planning tasks, prioritizing as well. And then you've got monitoring. So it's really important when you put in place processes that you're making sure that you're going back to those processes and you're revising those, you're monitoring them, you're reflecting on these sorts of things as well. Because ultimately what you want to be doing is keeping check. And I've got some really good ways and some strategies to do that, which will assist you both at uni and both in practice as well. So that's the time management in a nutshell. Just wanted to show one quick diagram that might show you how they're interconnected. So if you look there as well, this is taken from a really a great study that I read as well. But if you look there as well, you can see you've got those factors relating to ourselves, and we'll talk about these in a little bit later as well. You've got those behaviours I went through just then as well. So you've got your time assessment, planning and monitoring. You've got your job characteristics. So we talk about workload and the autonomy, which we're just about to touch on, which all contributes to this perceived control of time concept, personal self-efficacy, and also, so then you can see the outcomes of those. So how does it all relate? And you can see in terms of well-being, you've got better job satisfaction, which means you're more likely to stay in your job, be happier in your job, and not be looking, to leave or go into a different industry. Work strain is going to be reduced. Those psychosomatic health complaints is very much those, burnout factors as well, and stress-related illnesses. And also in terms of your performance and productivity, you've got better job performance and effectiveness. So I think that's a really great way to demonstrate how they're all interconnected. So I think Graham's going to talk you through some of the tips that he's put together. I think you're on mute, Graham.
Yeah, 2 minutes ago I said I have to remember to unmute myself. But anyway, I think there are 3 steps that we need to work through. And the first one, let's share the screen there. Yeah, there we go. Is we need to critically take control and accept responsibility. We can't continue to be victims of time. We need to, oops, bear with me here. I think it's just disappeared on us. Technology battling away. Firstly, you need to actually accept responsibility for your own time management. You can't go about the day feeling sorry for yourself. A classic example is when we say, I don't have enough time to do something. Okay, we all got the same amount of time during the day. We have a lot of expectations placed on us by many people. We get to choose what we do and what order we do things in to a certain extent. Why is taking control so important, Desi?
Me as I'm drinking water then. So taking control is very important. As you can see, if we looked at that model that I just showed you before, and I'm going to share my screen here as well, because I wanted to talk about a couple of things firstly, particularly as you're starting to transition into practice as well. We know that one of the reasons why lawyers suffer from poor mental health is a result of something called low decision latitude. So it's when you've got high levels of responsibility and a low level of control. Now, how is this relevant? We know that you're going to have job demands, which are those psychological stresses that stem from the work environment or workload. And then you've got the level of control. So that job control being the extent to which a job's going to provide you with that level of freedom, the independence, discretion, in scheduling your work and determining the procedures to be used, in carrying that out. Now, as I was saying, that low decision latitude, we know that a combination of a high workload and low job autonomy may produce more stress complaints. Okay, this is what we refer to as the stress hypothesis. Now, in contrast, we know that combining high demands and high control are actually expected to result in active learning behaviour, because we've got these intrinsic rewards by, we have a high demand, but we're able to control our situation as well. So this is what we refer to as it being the activation hypothesis. Now I want to show you this model here. And this is a model, they call it the Karasek model. And you can see there in those quadrants, you've obviously got the control and decision at work there, and then you've got the psychological demand at the top. So you can very much see, and it reinforces the point I was trying to make on the far right-hand side, that when there's a high level of control and a high, obviously demand as well, there'll be some learning and motivation to develop those new behavioural patterns. As a result, the low level of control and decision at work, and and high strain, that's when you're at risk to psychological stress and physical distress. And this is why when we're talking about taking control now, Graham will talk about that as being one of the first steps as well. So we know that when people feel that they have too much work to do and have to perform or have to work hard to perform the tasks, they may complete less planned work compared to when the workload is actually perceived as low. So it's interesting, about control is such an interesting beast in itself that, when someone feels as though they have a level of job autonomy, they may actually complete more planned work. And we'll talk about planned work as being, our third step to the little model we're talking about today. And the reason for this is because they have the opportunity to plan the tasks that they think they're able to complete, in any given week or in a work day, and perform what they had planned for themselves. Now, when we talk about control, and I want to show you this here, there was a psychologist called Therese Hoff-McCann who talked about something called perceived control. And you'll remember from that diagram I showed you how a lot of these behaviours contribute to perceived control, which has these positive outcomes in terms of well-being and also our productivity as well. So Therese Hoff-McCann discovered from her research that the most important is obviously perceived control of time, of one's feeling of being in control of how their time is spent, or their sense of ability to complete work and meet the deadlines in time. So we know that perceived control is, as it says, pertinent to theories of coping with stressful life events because it can threaten our basic needs for control. And it's been said that, events that are less controllable and predictable are thought to be, more likely to lead to, post-traumatic stress disorder. So from this study, it was discovered that people who sensed themselves to have control over their time felt less stress and anxiety and were more satisfied in their jobs than those who didn't perceive themselves as having control over their time. So ultimately, a person perceived having enough time to finish work was able to meet these deadlines the more than a person will finish in a timely fashion as well. What I found quite interesting as well is the fact that even if one objectively has the requisite number of hours to complete a task, if they lack perceived control, they're more likely to suffer from more time management problems as well. So there are some strategies that are able to be put in place to assist in gaining this control, and particularly when we talk about if things are outside control or you feel as though the workload is beyond you. This is when there needs to be a level of proactive conversation with various supervisors, or if it might be group work and things like that as well, if it's at uni where you need to speak up and be heard. So that's the perceived control in a nutshell there. So thanks, Graham.
Thanks, Desi. We've got our first controversial question there from Madeline. Is this an issue with the industry as opposed to the people in the industry? And I'd probably say a bit of B. Obviously, the industry is going through turmoil, as we saw last year with the Fair Work investigation. So yes, it is an issue with the industry, but it doesn't absolve us from self-responsibility. We still have a workload that we need to work through every day. We mightn't be able to decide what work that we have to do, but we can at least, and we should at least take the time to manage how we're going to work through that workload and how we're going to prioritize things, albeit in conjunction and hopefully with the assistance of the people that we're working for. But we can talk more about that. So just in relation to taking control, and we'll get into the mechanics of time managing very shortly, we want to be proactive. As lawyers, we have a tendency to be quite reactive. You deal with the ticking bombs on your desk. So in the cooking scenario or in the cafe scenario, what that would mean is, well, think about it. What's the first thing you might do in that situation? You walk into the kitchen, and some of you have commented already that it's not a particularly positive feeling, and it's there's a certain level of anxiety associated with that. Well, how would you start your day? What would you start off by doing in that situation? And the reactive approach might be dealing with the cleaning everything up, because that's the first little problem you have to deal with. And how does that play out in practice? Well, it means that the reactive approach would be you're dealing with whatever the biggest crisis is in front of you. You prioritise according to other people's priorities. That's what's most important, is other people's needs. You don't factor in your own needs. You wait for the client to call you, as opposed to being proactive, which would be being on the front foot, starting client communications, and critically starting your day by coming up with a plan before you do anything else. First thing we want to be doing is coming up with a plan for the day. And one of the keys to time management is figuring out what your own goals and demands are. Okay, so what are your professional goals in the short term, in the medium term, in the long term? What are your personal goals? So far as relationships and health, the things that make you happy, the things that make you feel engaged, the things that give meaning to your life. What are your professional and your personal goals? That's the starting point for time management. And then you should be managing your days around that. Yes, we have to go to work, and yes, we have to jump through other people's hoops, but you should do that on terms that you're comfortable with, okay? And factor in time to allow you to do things that you need to do to survive and to function. So we want you to be proactive. That's a critical step that we need to take as lawyers. Let's get on to another slide here, and I'll see if technology wants to be my friend this time. Okay. So the first step we say, take control of the situation, okay? Don't be a victim of time. Secondly, we're not all robots. We're all very different individually, although we share some common character traits. So you have to know your own tendencies when it comes to time management. What emotions are in play on a daily basis? And how do you react to those emotions? Are you primarily driven by anxiety and fear? Think about how you reacted to that cooking scenario. For those of you, someone said in the chat that it was a combination of fear, but also there was a positive reaction to it as well. And that's really critical. How are you going to frame what's ahead of you? We've all got those challenges. We've all got those fears, but as I say to my students, you need to make those fears your friend. Otherwise, you're just going to be feeling sick every day. So whether you frame something as something that's a threat to you or something that's an opportunity or a challenge is absolutely critical. We react to things very differently depending on how we frame it, whether it's a challenge and something that's enjoyable, in which case we're probably going to react in a positive way, or whether we go on the defensive and it's something that's a threat and we're driven by fear. So the framing of these challenges that you have on a daily basis is really critical. All right. So know yourself. We've all got individual tendencies, but the chances are most of us probably fall into this category of a perfectionist. Just briefly, somebody who sets the bar unreasonably high, they don't meet that standard, and it reinforces a negative self-image. This just goes to show that I'm not up to scratch. Well, you do hit that standard and you say, well, I should have pushed myself a little bit harder. So perfectionism can be great if it means you're getting the job done well and you're achieving a high standard of work, but it has its problems. Okay, firstly, the own negative self-image that it can reinforce, but also it can make for a lot of inefficiency. So if you work on a job for 3 hours and you get it to 80%, and that's good enough, but you want to spend another 4 hours on it to get it to 100%, well, maybe that's not appropriate in the circumstances. Maybe you've wasted time there. The perfectionists have a tendency to procrastinate too. Sometimes they'll say, well, I know I have to do this job. It's not going to be up to scratch. It won't be as good as I want it to be. So I'm not going to get a start on it just yet. I'm going to put that off until I get so terrified that I have no other choice but to start it. We can catastrophize about things, so enhance the fears we have about what's coming up. And we're rarely satisfied with what we get done. So the antidote for the perfectionist, and I think the starting point there is 2 words, and those words are good enough. Be able to identify good enough in any situation. Okay, perfectionism isn't realistic. Set more reasonable expectations for yourself. Not everything needs to be outstanding at all times. And if you have a tendency to procrastinate, you just need to get a start. All right, don't expect that you're going to have to get everything done at once. Just get a start. Work on it in small amounts and small blocks if need be. Also, if you have a tendency to be inefficient and spend too long on things, put some limits on your time and the amount of time you're actually spending on each task. Acknowledge your accomplishments. So we're not very good at that either. When we get things done, we're not very good at acknowledging the things we've done well. We're too focused on what we haven't done well or what we need to do. So write your accomplishments down, and having that little task list that you can tick off as you work through the day is a good feeling. Updating your CV on a regular basis so you know the sorts of files and the sorts of work that you've been doing is really important as well. And remind yourself often, and this is critical, okay? The reality is that to pretty much everybody that matters in our life, we're judged by who we are, not what we do. Whereas for the perfectionist and the high achiever, our self-esteem and our egos are very much tied around or tied into what we are doing as to give us a sense of self-worth and validation. But just remember, we are who we are, not what we do. Our worth and our value as humans shouldn't be tied up in how smart we are to be, or how wealthy we are, or how powerful we might be. That's where our friends and family really value us, is according to who we are, our own personal characteristics. So as a perfectionist, we have a tendency to beat ourselves up. Remind yourself that that's what you do is not who you are. Okay. Then we have the procrastinators, and we've talked a little bit about that already. Desi, I'm just going to cross to you in relation to pacing styles and the fact that we all pace ourselves very differently. Some people make a mad dash early, others wait till the fear gets big enough and scary enough to actually get a start on the job.
Nope, I have frozen.
Hey, you're back.
Oh, I know, I just heard something there. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Unstable internet connection, that's fine. Just let me know if something goes wrong. Yes, and look, we are very much, and I suppose, some of the sorts of things and the ways that we operate, and, in terms of the way we approach, a particular task or an activity as well, we know that, for some people, there's a tendency for people to postpone their tasks until the last moment, which very much aligns with what you're talking about with procrastinators. They'll start working on the tasks when the deadline's near, to avoid this stress ultimately as well. For some, it might be a situation where, they might be the early starters. So really chipping away because there is a bit of a fear about what could happen, what happens if something went wrong. So there is probably a likelihood for there to be a bit of a future orientation there, which we'll talk about in just a moment. I want to show you this one here, because if you can see that diagram there, you can probably associate yourself with one of those 5 different styles in the way that you work on a task or an activity, whether it be at uni, whether it be attacking a task at work. You can see those early action workers on the left-hand side there as well. Those will start doing a lot of work at the beginning, and then they'll taper off. Some people in the middle, more the constant action, and some people just really function well with the pressure of the deadline. And, for those at uni, you might be one of those people that work really effectively with that pressure of the deadline. One point I wanted to make, though, in terms of pacing styles, particularly when you're working in groups as well, at uni, group work, or might be when you're in practice as well, in your practice areas as well, is just to be cognizant of the different ways that people approach tasks. You might be in a group at uni, and some people don't seem to be pulling their weight at the beginning. And what my suggestion here would be to, once you are working on a task as a group, to call a meeting early, whether it be face-to-face for those states that are able to do that, or if you're in a state that's a little bit more difficult, just tee up a Zoom meeting or something and say, look, this is our expectations for this. And attribute some timings as well. So by, next Monday, we want to have worked, read the judgment and summarised it. And by this date, we want to do this. So then everyone's expectations are nice and clear. And that way, those that, have different pacing styles will at least be able to align with the group expectations for this as well. So I just wanted to show that we are all different. And, for some people that you might not be procrastinators, but it's just to be cognizant of everyone's different pacing style. So I'll just stop that now. Thanks.
Thanks, Desi. And by the same token, there's nothing wrong with really thinking on things and starting a job, but thinking it through. And a lot of people make a good run right at the end, but you just don't want to be in that situation where you're predominantly driven by fear and you're full of cortisol and you're full of anxiety. It's just not a pleasant way to go about things. Let's talk a little bit more about the individual characters, traits, before we get to step 3. And there's a great question there, which I will very much deal with in step 3, which is in relation to how do you deal with it when you come up with your plan for the day and then somebody throws that out the window because they want you to do all these urgent tasks. I will address that very directly shortly. We've talked perfectionists, we've talked procrastinators, and I'll actually, let's jump ahead for a slide, because here we go. This is what procrastinators do. You ready for it? Have I got time to procrastinate? Something might be due in a month's time. Have I got time? Yes, absolutely. So why would you get a start when you can procrastinate a bit more? So we go with what's easy or interesting. That's what we tend to go to, as opposed to that difficult task. We wait for the fear to kick in until you get so anxious that you actually have no choice but to start and get the job started. But you might wait until the fear gets overwhelming, and then it's not very pleasant to experience that and have to deal with that. You may not have enough time to get the job done well, and that can lead to reinforcing some negative mental loops or thought loops again. The key for procrastinators: be aware of it, be honest with yourself if that's what you do, and get a start anywhere. Just make a start at some point. Meet inspiration halfway, so don't expect to be overwhelmed by inspiration. Just get a start somewhere along the line. Break it into smaller tasks so that it's more manageable. The 7 minutes of pain, I don't know if it's one that I found out about in my research, and it involves this. If this is for the serious procrastinator, you sit at your desk with the work in front of you that you have to do, and you don't do anything. You sit there and you look at it for 7 minutes until by the end of that the theory is by the end of that 7 minutes, you're actually going to be really motivated to get a start on it because you just can't take it anymore. So that's some of the steps for the procrastinators. But there are some other, just talking quickly in relation to the other personality types as well. The busy bees. Busy bees won't actually, they're always busy, always doing something, but they have no idea how to prioritize things or what order things should be in. They may struggle to say no to people, and many of you won't be able to say no to people. But just keep in mind, if you say yes to everything, then you're still inherently saying no to some things, because you just can't do everything. And people will, because we get the job done, they will keep throwing work at us. Even family and friends, and their expectations that they might have on us might be unreasonable. So you have to be able to say no. Otherwise, you'll get to a point where you just can't cope anymore. We've got the magical thinkers who will deny a deadline. There's no deadline. I'm going to pretend it's not existing. So I'm just going to go into complete denial. So the antidote to that is actually coming up with a timetable, coming up with a plan, and sticking to it. Back to the yes people. This is a couple of lines from a Brisbane solicitor called Chris Hargraves, and he says this: the starting point for anyone who's going to manage their time effectively is to start saying no. That's terrifying at first, because you'll feel like you're missing out on opportunities as a result of your discipline, or that you'll be perceived as a slacker if you start turning things down. But once you get it, and once you start habitually saying no to the things that you should, it's a liberating process that will free you up to experience real productivity. So get comfortable with saying no to people, otherwise you're going to fall apart. There's the easily distracted types as well. The easily distracted will start a job, but then go with something else that's more interesting or easier. So be really aware of what your own distractions might be. It might be emails, it might be the internet, it might be going for snacks. But just be aware if you are easily distracted. The remedy to that one is to be more disciplined, come up with a timetable and set limits on your time and stick to those times. Take breaks, because sometimes when we're fatigued, that's when we're more easily distracted. So breaks are really important. Reward yourself for getting through, and it might be whatever. That might be your cookie or your walk around the block, or whatever your reward will be for working through that particular task. And then we get to law students, and I know there's a lot of law students out there, so I'm just going to show you this slide. Here are some things we know about law students. Okay, the strengths are you've got a great work ethic. Okay, there's no issue with your work ethic. There's no issue with your desire for organisation. That is there. However, some of the challenges with a law student, you don't have that routine. You work the funny hours. You've got a lecture here and a seminar there. You can be very future oriented. So you're really focusing on that exam or the assessment that you've got coming up down the track. And you do limited planning in advance. I think the average law student doesn't really plan much out more than a couple of weeks ahead of time. So what law students need to do is, the suggestion is, treat that study as a job. Come up with a daily timetable. Try and keep normal hours, but treat it as a job and be more disciplined as to what you have to do and when you need to do that by. Start using timetables and calendars, and that's what's going to tie in with the third step in relation to time management. And this all really comes from Anthony Bourdain. What he would say is that when he gets to work, first thing in the morning, he's not dealing with the dishes, he's not doing the cleaning. He's taking that time, 10 or 15 minutes at the start of every day, to come up with a plan for the day. And I think that's a critical step. Accept responsibility, plan your day, have some structure for what you're going to do. And I think the critical time to do that is even better that before you go home at night, so you can rest easy. You're probably going to be a whole lot more relaxed because you've taken control over the next day and you know what's coming up. And this leads us to the third step, which is planning. So the first thing we want to do when we get into the kitchen is come up with a plan for the day. And I'm not going to be too prescriptive about how you time manage your day. There's apps out there that you can use. There are web pages you can use. Some people use Excel spreadsheets. But my suggestion is you just need to write a list of some sort that you can add to as the day goes on. Be precise about what it is that you need to do. Don't just write a subject there. Don't just write the file name for the lawyers out there. Be precise about what it is you actually need to do. Okay, that will make you more disciplined and it's less vague. You know when you've accomplished the task. Critically estimate time. You're better off making a bad estimate of time than not making an estimate of time at all. So estimate how much time you think the task is likely to take. That will make you more disciplined and hopefully overcome procrastination and time wasting and distractions and that sort of thing. And the fourth step is critical. You need to prioritize. Come up with your list. Figure out what you need to do, how long each of those tasks is likely to take, and then figure out what order that should be in. And that can be a challenge for a young lawyer because you're working for 4 or 5 different people and you don't know how to prioritize. You don't know what order things should be done in. And as a young lawyer said to me, well, the good news is that it's not your job to do that. You should be talking to supervisors and the people you work with about what priority things should be done in and in what order they want things done in. But they are 4 of your basic steps, or a number of basic steps to your time managing and the mechanics of time managing. Write a list, be precise, estimate time, figure out your priorities in the order that things want to be done. And one of you asked the question about responding to change. What do we do when we come up with that order or we come up with that list and then somebody bombs it? They throw something on your desk and well, I tell you what happens. What happens with me is automatically my reaction is emotional. I feel stressed. I feel like I can't cope anymore. And that's basically what stress is, having more on than your resources can cope with. So what I suggest to you in that situation, yes, you've come up with your beautiful plan for the day and your timetable. Somebody throws that out the window, just expect it because it's going to happen every day. But that's the nature of our jobs. It's what we do. Number one, be aware of your own emotional reaction, okay, and how you react to that. Just be aware of it. But then you have to go straight back to it and start planning what you need to do. You need to adjust your plan accordingly. And if you don't know how to do that or how to approach that issue, have a discussion with your supervisor or somebody else, but control that emotion. Don't let it rattle you. Deal with that situation. Communicate with the people around you as to how to deal with it, how to approach it. Ask for help where that's appropriate. And if you need to adjust your time plan, then adjust your time plan. What I might do is cross to Desi, who's going to talk a little bit about.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk because it's exactly what what I was about to just to elaborate on there as well. And there was a question that came through about do you have any tips for continuing to manage your regular workload when you're getting these last-minute urgent tasks as well? So this is what I can share with you here. All right, so when you are planning and prioritising, a real strong distinction needs to be made between the importance and urgency of the tasks. And these are the factors that, are going to affect, why one task is going to receive that higher priority than the other one as well. We know that some tasks are going to be important in terms of consequence, and that's for quality and quantity of the performance. So that's the importance. And some have those clear time-related aspects in that they require that immediate action. So you need to make, it's a bit like, the triage list in a hospital. You need to actually make that distinction because people tend to consider each new task that arises as being the one that's the most urgent and start acting on it instead of considering whether is it actually really important to do the task now or can it be put off to a later date. So if I show you this here, and I'm sure this model's been created by quite a few different people, but this is by Stephen Covey. So you need to have a think about what the task is. Okay, is it important and and urgent? So if you look at quadrant 1, they're the necessity activities as well. So the crises, the deadline-driven activities as well. And I suppose in practice as well, if you're not sure, check with a supervisor as well and say, look, what is the urgency of this matter? Okay, have a list. Can we push this off? Or are we very much driven by a deadline? So then you can triage it to the top of the list. You've got your important but not urgent, as you can see there. You're not important but urgent as well. So, some of those emails and calls, and then you've got your quadrant 4, which is about wasting, so the junk emails and busy work and things like that as well. So in response to the question about the some of the unplanned tasks, we know also that unplanned tasks, may be perceived as being more urgent than planned tasks because they arrive more recency. There's some theory behind something called the recency factor. So what that is basically, the last thing that we hear in a list, we tend to remember, or we place greater importance on as well. So this also may influence the importance of tasks as well. So we tend to see there is a trade-off between planned and unplanned tasks in this regard, and unplanned tasks may function sometimes as a welcome distraction of the work, yet may also be perceived as work interruptions, which can imply the postponement of ongoing tasks and activities as well. So that's really important to take into account as well. So that covers that. Thanks, Graham.
No worries. Thank you, Desi. And we've got some good questions coming in. I want to spend some time dealing with those, but I'm just going to cap off some of the key points or finish off some of the key points that we're trying to make here. So the 3 critical steps: accept responsibility, okay, know yourself and your own tendencies, and thirdly, take control. Start writing a list, estimate time, figure out how you're going to prioritize that. But when you're doing that, okay, there's a suggestion that we should start the day by eating the frog. So what the hell does that mean? It comes from that Mark Twain quote. If you start, the first thing you do each day is to eat a live frog, then your day is not going to be a whole lot worse than that. But what it means in a time management sense is that whatever that nasty task is, the hardest task, the most challenging task might be, do that first thing in the morning, because that's when you're less fatigued, that's when you're less tired, and you're likely to be more alert and more capable of dealing with that task. So when you are time managing, just keep that in mind. Keep in mind whatever that difficult or challenging task is, try and deal with that first thing in the morning when you're still alert, because you will fatigue as the day goes on. So let's deal with some questions here. What would I recommend for law students working full-time and studying externally? Well, time is really precious to you, and then you throw in family commitments there and looking after yourself. I have no prescriptive advice there other than to say you do need to time manage, and I'd suggest you do that on a daily basis, because you can't afford to waste time or study inefficiently. You can't afford to procrastinate or be distracted. So it's really critical for you to come up with those timetables and come up with those plans. Now, found that most managers will always think their task is a priority, particularly clients as well. I always used to imagine myself having a flashing light and a siren on my desk, because every client's matter was always urgent. They always needed it dealt with urgently. One of the critical things here is communication. So you might have managers, they may not know what you have on your desk. So keep a working list going of what you have on, and you have to have that conversation with them. Listen, this is what I've got on here. What order do you want me to do things in? And if they're a bad boss, they'll say something like, I just want everything done and I want it done now. Well, that's a hopeless situation. But they need to be informed about what you have on your desk, as do the other people that you're working for. And you need to have those conversations with them and inform their expectations. There's just going to the Q&A now. How do you get others to stick to agreed timetables and deliver quality on time? Well, again, that's communication with them. Are those timetables reasonable? What's running interference with their inability to stick with those timetables? You need to have that conversation. And if there's an issue with quality, then you need to talk with them about that. So I don't know how you make them do that, but you can certainly communicate with them more about that. How do you know if you're bad at time management or don't generally have enough time to get through the workload assigned to you? Bad at time management means you're probably miserable, because every day is just stress. You don't get it done and you feel like you're a bit of a failure. If you don't get everything done that's assigned to you, that's not necessarily solely your fault. That might be because the expectations of others are unreasonable, or because you're not communicating with them effectively, or you need some strategies to be more efficient. You're entitled to supervision as a young lawyer, so you should be asking for that supervision and having those conversations. What would we recommend for a law student who's working full-time and studying externally? Again, you need to just be more efficient because you've got such limited time. You need to be efficient, and it just highlights the importance of that of the discipline in time managing. Desi, I don't
Graham,
know.
I can take the last question actually, because
please do.
I know a little bit about that. So there's a question that's come through. I don't know if everyone can see that, but it's someone said they saw an article discussing the fact that in the UK, legal practitioners have said they actually have a better work-life balance while working at home during the pandemic and are dreading going back to the office. And they've heard from a few legal practitioners in Australia that the big law firms allow them to work from home where necessary. So the question being, do you think there's a cultural shift at firms to be allowing this sort of flexibility to the sort of flexibility is necessary in the industry? Look, I think there's going to be a lot of silver linings out of this pandemic. I've been a party to a couple of different webinars as well, global webinars, where we've been talking about this exact question in terms of the fact that people feel as though they are more productive at home, and there is a much better work-life balance as well, in the sense that they're able to spend time with family. They're able to have the plumber over when they need them, and able to pick up their groceries and see people, and fit in that exercise as well. So it's been a bit of a breath of fresh air for a lot of people as well. So I think that there is going to be some really interesting changes, I think, particularly in terms of flexible work, and I think that's it's going to be quite liberating as well. So watch this space, I think, as well. Can I just add one last thing, just if there's a few questions coming in, because we'll wait a few minutes before we finish up. Like anything in life, if you don't check in on yourself regularly and your time management as well, we are creatures of habit. We're going to fall victim to our inherent proclivities, as you put it that way as well. So I wanted to show you this diary study, and I'm very happy to share it with anyone post-session as well. And I think this is a terrific way to assess your own progress as well. And you do it after the day's up, and you can see there on the screen you've got it will assist you in prioritizing the tasks that you have, so to assist you in actually those planned tasks, and then you can triage them in terms of that importance, urgency and attractiveness. You can attribute a percentage to how much was finished, and an explanation. Did someone interrupt you? Did you I don't know, did you do something when separate to what you should have been doing at that time? Were you procrastinating? And then some unplanned tasks as well, because then you're contingency planning as well, which is going to very much happen in practice. So, and then you can associate a value there to that as well. And then over in terms of your well-being as well, you can attribute, again, the percentages in terms of the planned, unplanned work interruptions and private matters. Did you skip the tasks? And then you rate how satisfied you were ultimately, because that's what's going to have that association with your well-being as well. So you get to colour in a little smiley face there about how satisfied you were. Did you think that it aligned with the planning that you did for that day? So happy to share that with anyone if they'd like. So that's all. Thanks, Graham.
Thanks, Desi. So just by way of wrap up, as we finish thing right on time, and we'll hang around and take as many questions as you want to throw at us. Critically, you've got to make time for yourself, okay? If you've got a right to be happy. You've got a right to enjoy your day. If every day of work is just misery and every day of study is misery, something needs to give. So set your goals. What are your personal goals? What are your professional goals? And then start time managing around that. But what works for you? What's going to make you happy, okay? Make time for yourself, whether it's exercise, time with friends. You have to do that. Let's just quickly summarize some of the things that we've talked about, okay? So what are the takeaways from today? So for a lot of us, we saw time management is largely driven by an array of fears. Our lives would be much more enjoyable and productive if we just addressed those fears head on and we focused on getting the job done. The job might be good enough for the client, but as perfectionists, it's unlikely to ever be good enough for us. And that fear of not being good enough can lead us to procrastinate. So we want you to take control. The key is to take control. Be more proactive, be less reactive. We're probably always going to have more on than we can handle. We need to get more comfortable with saying no to people. Time management should be about doing the things that are good for us. So what I want you to ask yourselves is, what are you going to do now to improve your own time management? Have a go at writing lists. Have a go at doing that on a daily basis. Know your own flaws and your own tendencies and your distractions. Aim for good enough. Don't aim for perfection. Manage those distractions that might come along. Be proactive. Take 10 minutes each day to plan the day. It'll reduce your anxiety. It's going to improve your work performance. And it won't happen with you taking the time to do it, but you have to take control of that situation. We also want you to recognize your accomplishments as well. So I'm going to stick a little survey in the chat box there. We'd be grateful if you could take a minute or two of your time just to give us a bit of feedback on this presentation, whether you thought that it is worthwhile. Really short survey. We'd be grateful for you taking the time. We've got another webinar coming up on Wednesday, the 16th of September. That's called Looking Beyond the Clerkship Process. Susan Pincus from College Victoria is going to be hosting a discussion with 3 legal practitioners on how students can start thinking beyond the traditional career path, and that's on Wednesday the 16th of September. If any of you are interested in mental health first aid or doing the mental health first aid courses, you can get in touch with the college, because we run them in the workplaces, and I think they're really critical for everybody's well-being. But on that note, did you want to say anything, Desi, before we start?
No, I mean, we'd probably pop up our contact details if anybody would like. And I said I popped in the chat if anybody wants a copy of some of the slides or the diary study or any of the models. I'm happy to share them. So I will be arranging for the diary study to be sent out to everyone post session as well. I think, Graham, you're going to pop up our contact details if anybody wants to get into contact with the mental health first aid as well. We'll be delivering some sessions for those uni students that are involved with ALSA as well. So you may well see us again at some stage. So that's quite exciting.
We're on LinkedIn if you want to say hello, but we're going to hang around and deal with questions until your hearts are content. I think, unless there's anything else. I'm just looking through the chat to see if you have any questions for us. No worries. Thank you for your kind words. It's been a pleasure presenting. I think that might be it in a nutshell. It's a skill that you have to develop, and we didn't want to be too prescriptive about what you have to do. So get out there and have a go. Just do something on a daily basis. Come up with a list. Work your way through it. Be conscious and cognizant of your own emotions, and manage those emotions. Take control of the situation. Come up with a plan. Have discussions with your bosses about it. Discussions with your clients, and it's a work in progress for all of us, I promise you. But thank you very much, everybody, for logging in today. Thank you for all your kind words, and hopefully we'll see you at some other presentations down the track.
All the best, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.